Good morning, dear students. Now today we are adding to the another features of democracy. To start with, I may remind you once again that democracy is a system in which the rulers are elected by the people. But we need to meticulously analyze that what type of election is it. Now, in order to know that one, we need to add some second feature of democracy, that is free and fair electoral competition. That is also very important. If election in democracy is important, equally important is its freedom and fairness to contest election. Let us see in detail about that with the help of this example. In China, elections are held every 5 years. It means that China is a democratic country, very famous. China is these days. China is very famous for different reasons all over the world. So here the elections are held. The prime president of China is an elected post. So from that perspective, China is a democracy. But when we go into the detail of this one, we would conclude that this election is not free, or election in China is not free. How? There are 3,000 people elected in Chinese parliament, popularly known as National People's Congress. So, in other words, the total strength of National People's Congress of China is around 3,000, and all of them are elected. But when we make the breakup into those elections, we find that some of them are only being elected by the army. You see, the freedom is started being restricted. Means every other people, some very influential people may be coming from the another walk of life, is only been elected by or authorized by the army to go into this Chinese Congress or People's Congress. Okay. Now, another very important thing of democracy that you would have studied in the lower classes. Suppose in India is a democracy. In India, if we want to contest election, we need only two things basically. One, we need to be the citizen of India, and second, we need to be at least 25 years of age. Irrespective of our gender, status, anything, that hardly matters who you are, what you do, whether you are literate or educated or highly scholar or illiterate one, you are very rich or very poor. These things are never taken under consideration. If you have the wish and desire to contest election, you need to be the citizen of India basically, and you need to be at least 25 years of age and nothing more than that. Okay. You can join any party and you can get the ticket from those parties in order to contest election. If any party is not giving you as or not selecting you as their candidate or its candidate, you can even contest election independently. Okay. But here in China, the things are not as easy as it should be in democracy. So, in other words, in India, we have a freedom of contesting election, which is absent in the case of China. Before contesting elections in China, a candidate has to seek approval of the Communist Party of China. Unless the Communist Party of China is not giving you the permission, you cannot contest election. In other words, you need to be the member of the Communist Party, or there are 8 another affiliates of those Communist Party, that Communist Party of China. Only you need to be either the members of them or the members of the Communist Party. So to put it simple, you need to be a communist there in China in order to contest election. Means there is no freedom of contest. Of course, the people are elected, the representatives are elected by the people. They have a parliamentary setup also. Elections are held every after 5 years, all sounding very democratic, but in actual sense, the people in China did not have the freedom of contesting election unless the Communist Party of China is not authorizing. In other words, we may say that China has only one party system, that is Communist Party of China. So that is not democratic. So one party system, in other words, even if we don't do any good to the people, nobody can go to replace us. So we may start behaving in a dictatorial way if we are only the single party systems. In the true spirit of democracy, in order to be qualified as the democratic election, at least there must be the two or multi-party system there. Okay, at least 2 or 3 parties must, for sure, if not multi-party, because multi-party sometimes appears to be very messy, as in the case of India. Okay, so the one condition has been very necessary, which is in the case of China is denied, that there is no freedom in contesting of election. Let us move to the another example of Mexico, because these two features are very important for democracy. One is the freedom to contest election, and second, the fairness of election. Let us see the fairness can also be sometimes violated or denied by going through the example of Mexico is, as we know, that one is the South American country. It became independent in the year 1930, Mexico. Now here also, after 1930, Mexico also adopted the democratic setup. In Mexico, we have also democracy, and in Mexico, elections are held in order to elect their representative. However, elections in Mexico are held every after 6 years, fine. Now never Mexico, that is another very important part of Mexico, that Mexico never been ruled by a dictator or a military. Means from all viewpoint, Mexico is an ideal democracy. Sounding up to year 1930, Mexico became independent. Since then, the elections started taking place in Mexico in order to choose their representative or choose its administrator. And every after 6 years, everybody gets the chance to contest elections. So, freedom is there. In the case of China, nobody, unless you don't get the approval or the assent or the consent of the Communist Party of China, you cannot contest election there. But on the contrary, here the case is different. Anybody who wishes to contest election need to qualify that minimum eligibility criteria and can contest election here. But until 2000, you see, for 70 long years, after every 6 years, of course, the elections have been conducted there in in Mexico. But since then, until 2000 AD, the only party that won the elections in Mexico was the PRI party. PRI stands for Institutional Revolutionary Party. Okay, so this only party won the election. It is, you may say that, sir, what is unusual into that one? The party might be very, very meritorious, would have been doing a lot of good for the people. So that is why that party has been time and again repeating into the power. That is quite obvious and natural. There is nothing wrong into that one. So it is all fair and fine. Okay, fine. But then when we go and examine it in detail, we find the different story. What is that? Opposition also contest election there in China, in Mexico. It means that as in China there is freedom up against China. In China there is no freedom. Here in Mexico we have a freedom of anybody who wishes to contest election can contest election. But opposition party in Mexico never ever won election. Reason? Media was always biased to PRI party. In the election campaign, the PRI party was media only followed and favored PRI party. Because we know that one election campaign is a very important medium of election. It is that particular process through which the contestant get interacted with the voters. During the election campaign, it's a type of advertisement. Why my party? Why should a voter give the vote in the favor of a particular party? Is been made to the public through that election campaign process. And if in election campaign, you would have also seen during the election period, many parties are been frequently appearing on television and media. Newspapers are filled and colored with the speeches of the different leaders, and the election campaigns and meetings are quite frequent all the time. Okay, so it is very important process of electoral system. And here, if anybody, suppose in India also, If a particular party is only been frequently appearing on television and all the channels are only favoring and covering that particular party, even if the opposition party are doing good, they have a very better program, rather the better program for the people, but unless it is not been advertised, the people may not be able to know that one and the voters may not give their vote. So that election campaign is also very important. Here, media also only followed. Even that school teachers, the government teachers were forcing or telling their students to go to the home and convince their parents to give their votes in the favor of PRI party, otherwise they would be meeting with the dire consequences. So you see each and every government teachers and the government employees in Mexico had to attend the PRI party's meeting also. You see, so even if the others are allowed or were allowed to contest election, they literally have no chance to win election because neither the media nor the system was been allowing them the freedom of contesting election from the viewpoint of what? That they cannot be able to campaign themselves, to advertise themselves. So in case of China, everybody was not free to contest election even though election was held. In the case of Mexico, the people were free to contest election. Other party had the freedom of contesting election other than the PRI party, but never managed to win the election. Okay. Here, who was only winning the election? Only Communist Party of China. Here in Mexico, only the PRI party. So result was more or less the same, the one single party always repeating to the power. So by going through both the examples, we have concluded or we have seen that in case of China, the freedom was being violated. In case of Mexico, the fairness was violated. Even if the election was done, both the countries are democratic country. So democracy is of course necessary. Election is very, very fundamental and basic, but equally important is the freedom to contest election as well as fairness of election. So finally, we must say that a democracy must be based on a free and fair election where those currently in power have a fair chance of losing also. So if anybody has been repeating and only the same person has been repeating time and again, we may smell some dirty tricks which is established in the case of Mexico. For today, the another feature we will be discussing in my next class. Till then.